Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're zeroing in on something really insidious, actually. It's that culture of silence you sometimes find inside organizations. Yeah, that invisible barrier that kind of creates the whole yes man environment. It's especially risky in companies with, really strong top-down power structures. We've pulled together quite a bit here, research from organizational psychology, some pretty sobering lessons from big corporate disasters, and some specific analysis looking at workplaces in the Asia Pacific, especially Vietnam, where this is studied quite a lot. And here's the thing that really stands out. When you see everyone in a meeting just nodding along, well, often that yes isn't really agreement, it's avoidance.
It really is. It creates this safe illusion. You get this false harmony that feels okay on the surface, but underneath, it's hiding some serious problems. And that false harmony, it's probably the most expensive thing a company can buy, honestly. So our mission today is to really dig into the psychological and cultural reasons why smart people just shut down, why they choose not to speak up. We'll look at the huge costs this silence brings, and then this is crucial. We'll explore some practical ways, some blueprints maybe, for building a workplace where speaking up isn't seen as like rocking the boat, but as just part of the job, a duty even.
Yeah, and to really set the scene, this quote from an HR director we found in the sources, it really hit me. They said, "In the meeting, everyone nods, but outside, no one understands and no one acts."
Oof.
You
Yeah.
can just feel the waste, right? The eventual train wreck that comes from everyone just nodding politely. So, okay, let's break down what actually drives that silence. Our research suggests it's more complicated than just people being afraid of their boss.
That's right. The analysis points to three really common, distinct types of silence. The first one is probably the most familiar. Silence due to fear. Classic stuff. You're worried about being wrong or getting criticized publicly, or in some contexts, there's this fear of being yim. That's a term used in some of the Vietnamese analysis. It means being targeted or having that disagreement, held against you down the line. Performance reviews, promotions, that sort of thing.
Okay, that makes sense. Fear. But the second one you mentioned, that's the one I found, kind of more disturbing. Silence due to emptiness.
Bro? Yeah?
Right. So this isn't fear of getting in trouble. It's silence because someone feels they literally have nothing useful to add. Like they lack the knowledge or maybe the skills to even engage.
Exactly. They feel they don't have the professional background or the analytical chops to contribute anything meaningful, so they just stay quiet.
Wow. Okay, and the third type?
The third one gets into pure survival instinct almost.
Yeah.
It's silence due to laziness in Vietnamese.
Wait, laziness is survival. How is that different from someone just being, burned out or disengaged?
It's more strategic than that, actually. It's a conscious calculation. The thinking goes something like, look, if I keep my mouth shut, I won't get assigned extra work. I won't get tagged with responsibility for this project.
So it's avoiding accountability.
Precisely. If I don't speak, I can't be blamed if it goes wrong. It's an active choice to minimize your own effort and risk, often because you see the environment as, maybe toxic or unfair. Self-preservation.
Okay, so you've got fear, emptiness, and this calculated laziness all mixed together in a meeting.
Yeah, potentially all at once.
So the result is the company looks calm on the outside, everyone's nodding,
Yeah.
but inside, it's stagnation.
Total stagnation. The few people who are trying to speak up get worn out. The people listening are maybe just pretending to understand what they're supposed to do.
And the teams actually tasked with doing the work are left scratching their heads like, where do we even start? It's this huge hidden drag on everything.
And what's really interesting is how basic psychological biases just pour fuel on this fire, that yes man thing. It's classic conformity.
Right.
You see conformity bias, that, deep-seated need we have to just fit in, to be accepted by the group. Then there's authority bias. That's when we put almost absolute trust in people with power or titles, sometimes even when our own common sense is, screaming that something's off. And driving both of those is often the fear of exclusion. Nobody wants to be the odd one out, right? The lone voice disagreeing with everyone else. It's deeply uncomfortable.
That reminds me of those classic experiments like Ash's conformity study.
Exactly, like the Ash experiments, where people would literally deny what they were seeing just to go along with the group's wrong answer. It's powerful stuff.
So, okay, these biases are kind of human nature, but how do they get supercharged in cultures with really strong vertical power structures, like the ones analyzed in, say, many Asian workplaces?
Well, it's about how disagreement gets interpreted. In a very hierarchical culture, if you disagree with your boss, it's often not seen as, oh, that's useful professional feedback.
It's seen as.
It's often immediately interpreted as being disrespectful, as being rebellious even. A leader might say, oh yes, please give me feedback, but their face, their whole body language might be tense, basically shouting, don't you dare challenge me.
Which connects right into that cultural idea of losing face, or si din.
Absolutely. If speaking up and potentially being wrong means you lose face, which is a huge deal socially in many cultures, then silence feels like the only safe option.
Better to say nothing than risk public embarrassment or damaging your reputation.
Almost always, yeah. And this ties into communication priorities too. Sometimes there's more value placed on keeping things smooth, on maintaining harmony, hoa ki, than on digging for the maybe uncomfortable truth.
So a meeting with no arguments is seen as a success.
It can be, mistakenly. Everyone's polite, everyone's even-tempered, so it feels successful, even if the decisions made were based on flawed thinking, because nobody challenged anything.
And going back to that silence due to emptiness, if the education system doesn't emphasize critical thinking, does that feed into it?
The sources definitely suggest a link. If education is mostly rote learning, memorizing facts rather than analyzing and questioning, you can end up with people who feel deep down that they aren't really competent to challenge things.
Self-recognized incompetence, as one source put it.
Yeah, so you just default to waiting for someone else, someone perceived as smarter or more senior, to do the thinking for you.
And then there's the group dynamic itself.
Oh, for sure. Basic social psychology. Diffusion of responsibility. You're in a big meeting, 20 people around the table. You spot a problem with the plan.
But
You think, well, surely someone else sees this too. Someone else will ask the tough question. The responsibility feels spread out, so nobody feels personally obligated to take the risk.
wow. Okay, so you pile up the fear, the emptiness, the laziness, the conformity bias, the authority bias, the fear of losing face, maybe some educational gaps, diffusion of responsibility.
Yeah, it's a potent cocktail.
And the result is,
Whoa, the sources describe it almost like an organizational disease.
it really is. And one of the first major symptoms is strategic blindness. The organization just loses its ability to self-reflect, to see risks coming down the road.
It becomes early blind to threats.
Exactly. So when a crisis finally hits, leadership is often genuinely blindsided. They had no idea it was coming because nobody told them the bad news.
And innovation.
It gets completely suffocated. Real innovation needs debate. It needs what the sources call constructive conflict. If every idea gets smoothed over immediately so nobody gets offended,
You lose the creative sparks.
you lose the edge. And what's worse, the people who do have that spark, the talented folks who naturally question things and push boundaries, they often get frustrated and leave.
So the company becomes a haven for mediocrity, or at least a career safe haven for people who just want to keep their heads down and coast. Not exactly a recipe for success.
And the consequences can be devastating. The sources bring up some really high-stakes examples, like the NASA Challenger disaster in '86.
A classic, tragic case. Engineers knew about the O-ring risks in cold weather. They warned management.
But the launch went ahead.
Yeah, management was worried about delays, about the public perception, maybe about losing face organizationally. The warnings got silenced or overruled.
And then you have the Boeing 737 MAX X.
Another sobering example. Reports suggest engineers knew the MCAS software had risks, but in that environment, the pressure to meet deadlines, to not slow things down, well, critical information didn't seem to make it up the chain effectively. Silence played a role.
And Enron. That's almost the poster child for this kind of toxic culture, isn't it?
Absolutely. Enron in 2001. The culture there actively rewarded people only if they agreed with leaders, only if they praised the strategies, even when their strategies were, frankly, fraudulent and doomed.
Wow, they were essentially paying people not to tell the truth.
That's one way to look at it, yeah. Silence wasn't just a symptom of the failure at Enron. It was a core mechanism of the failure that led to its complete collapse.
That really highlights the danger for leaders themselves, doesn't it? If they only hear good news, only hear agreement.
They become completely information blind. They're making huge decisions based on illusions they've helped create. They're trapped in an echo chamber of their own making.
Okay, so this paints a pretty bleak picture of silence driven by fear and dysfunction. But then the research takes an interesting turn, right? Not all silence is bad.
Exactly. We need to add some nuance here.
Yep.
Because yes, while that fear-based silence is destructive, there's another side to it. We found this fascinating academic study looking at a Vietnamese telecommunications company.
Okay.
And they explored silence through a very different lens, almost like a Buddhist-influenced perspective on intentional quietness.
Intentional silence in a busy telecom company. How does that work constructively?
Well, the researchers identified what they called the emancipatory dimensions of silence. Times when silence isn't about hiding or avoiding, but about deeper processing.
Okay, like what?
They found 3 key uses. First, reflexivity. This is using periods of quiet for deep self-examination, thinking through your own assumptions, your own position before you speak.
So using silence to check yourself, basically, not just to hide.
Exactly. And second, self-decentralization. This is about consciously using silence to shift the focus away from your own ego, your own need to win the argument or protect your status.
Interesting. Getting your ego out of the way.
Yeah. And third, transformation. Seeing silence not just as an absence of noise, but as an active, dynamic process that can actually help facilitate real change and understanding within a group.
That's a really different way of thinking about it. So silence isn't just one thing. It can be oppressive, driven by fear,
Right.
or it could potentially be constructive if it's used intentionally for reflection and getting beyond ego.
Precisely. It's complex. It's relational. You have to look at why the silence is happening and how it's being used or encouraged.
Okay, so acknowledging that complexity, let's pivot back to the destructive kind. How do organizations actually break that cycle? How do you move from that survival silence we talked about to a place where people feel safe, even obligated, to give honest feedback?
Yeah, the practical steps. The sources offer some good models. One really detailed one from the Vietnamese analysis is called the 5B model. It focuses on what leaders need to do, the conditions they need to create.
5 Bs. Okay, what's the first one?
First is beat, which means knowledge. This tackles that silence due to emptiness head on.
How?
The recommendation is pretty direct. Make critical thinking training mandatory. You can't expect people to offer useful critiques if they haven't been given the tools to analyze situations properly.
Right, given the how. Okay, that makes sense. What's the second B?
Second is bunlan. This translates roughly to guts or courage, but it's not just about employees having guts. It's about leaders creating the conditions for courage.
So it's about psychological safety again. That term can feel a bit fluffy sometimes. How do leaders actually build that? Any concrete examples?
Yeah, it has to be demonstrated, not just declared. Leaders need to visibly show vulnerability, admit their own mistakes publicly, and crucially, they need to actively praise, even promote, people who have challenged them constructively in the past.
So, walk the talk. Don't shoot the messenger.
Exactly. If you punish dissent, even subtly, all the talk about psychological safety is meaningless. Your bunlan as a leader vanishes overnight.
Okay, knowledge guts.
What?
The other 3 Bs.
Third is bintin, meaning calmness. This is about training everyone in professional communication. How to disagree respectfully, focusing on the issue, not the person, keeping debates rational, not emotional.
Got it. Avoid the shouting matches.
Right. Fourth is bund perseverance. Changing a culture of silence takes time and consistent effort. It needs ongoing coaching, reinforcement, leaders constantly modeling the right behavior. It's not a one-off initiative.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Definitely. And the 5th B is bingdom, meaning equality. This is about putting real mechanisms in place for two-way dialogue where ideas from anyone, regardless of rank, are genuinely heard and considered.
So it sounds like a huge part of this is fundamentally changing the reward system.
Absolutely critical. You have to start rewarding the people who speak the difficult truths, not just the ones who tell you what you want to hear.
And the sources mentioned things like anonymous feedback channels or the devil's advocate role.
Yeah, those are practical tools. Anonymous feedback can lower the fear factor. And formally assigning someone the role of devil's advocate in a meeting makes it their job to find flaws, which takes the personal risk out of challenging the consensus.
Okay, so that's the leadership side, the 5 Bs. Is there a corresponding model for employees?
There is. Complementary to the 5 Bs is a 5C model focused on how employees can give feedback effectively, making sure it lands well.
All right, what are the Cs?
First C is courage. Similar to bunlan, but from the employee perspective. Daring to actually say the difficult thing, maybe this is encouraged through things like reverse meetings where staff get to formally question leaders.
Okay, courage. What else?
Second, clarity. Your argument, your feedback needs to be clear and, importantly, based on facts, data, evidence, not just, I feel like this is wrong.
Move beyond gut feelings.
Right. Third C is constructiveness. Frame your disagreement in a way that points towards a solution, not just criticism. Practicing conditional agreement can help here. I agree with the overall goal, but I have concerns about this specific approach, and here's why.
So problem solving, not just problem spotting.
Exactly. Fourth is consistency. Making feedback a normal, regular part of how things work, not some big, dramatic, rare event.
And the last C.
Fifth is communication. Mastering how you deliver the message. Tone, phrasing, timing, it all matters when you're delivering potentially unwelcome news.
It really sounds like a two-way street. Leaders need to build safety, and employees need to step up responsibly.
That's the core idea.
And it's encouraging that the sources point to real companies actively doing this. You mentioned FPT in Vietnam.
Yeah, FPT is often cited for its speak honestly culture. They even have this tradition, GapMet 139, where employees get to publicly question and really grill senior leaders. It's baked into their culture.
Wow. Grilling the leaders publicly. And Vietnam too.
Yeah.
Even in a more military-style structure.
Even there, yes. Vietnam apparently emphasizes a philosophy that leaders must listen to constructive challenges from subordinates. It shows it's possible even in highly hierarchical settings if the commitment is there.
So it can be done. It takes work, but it's possible.
Absolutely. And I think the final takeaway from all this research, the core message, is pretty powerful. Someone summed it up as, silence is not gold if that silence kills the truth.
That says it all, really.
Yeah. A strong company, a healthy organization, it isn't built by everyone just agreeing all the time. It's built by people who have the courage and the skill to speak up about the things others might be afraid to say, but doing it with responsibility, with respect, and with the goal of making things better.
That's a perfect place to leave it, I think. And maybe a final thought for you, listening. If strong companies need people who dare to speak truth to power, or just truth to the group, how can you make sure that the next time you disagree, whether it's a big strategic issue or a small process problem, you frame it not just as an argument, but as a genuine act of responsible contribution? Something to think about.